right now. We've got ABC's Alex Brichet. He actually lives there in East Palestine, Ohio, where this is all happening. Also, we're going to be talking to Mustafa Ali. He worked for the EPA for 24 years. Alex, let's start with you. You have been covering this story from the very beginning. The governor says that this train was not considered a high hazardous train. The governor called it absurd. So let's start there, and then I'd love to talk to your resident there and hear about how she's doing with the kids.
Well, Kira, I mean, that was the thing that really kind of stood out during this press conference here, right? Hearing that this train was not classified as a hazardous train, knowing that at least 5 of the cars on board had this vinyl chloride and other toxic chemicals. Knowing that it had this vinyl chloride and these other toxic chemicals, why that wasn't classified as a hazardous train. And certainly that's going to be a question that gets posed over and over as this investigation continues. But one of the things that we're hearing, and I mean, look, I mean, East Palestine, it's a pretty small community. You throw up a pair of news lights and a camera, and you draw attention. And so we were setting up here, and actually one of the residents here that had to evacuate, Ashley McCullum, flagged me down and was like, hey, like, you know, one of the things that has been on their minds are a lot of these gas monitors there that are doing the readings around the neighborhoods, and also the impacts that this is having on not just them as residents, but the younger generation, kids. She has 2 of them and a handful of pets. And Ashley, I wanted to talk to you because, I mean, you've been evacuated this entire time. You haven't returned since the derailment. Is that correct?
Yes, since the first day, whenever they had the first initial evacuation.
Why haven't you come back home?
I don't feel like it's safe. A lot of other people are experiencing symptoms. They're trying to brush it off, or they don't have the funds to leave. So hearing that, I just don't want to come back until I know that it is safe.
One of the things that you were also telling me is that, bear with me as we deal with the motorcycle behind us, but one of the things you're also telling me is that, you know, it's also impacted, like, your school, the schooling for your kids.
Yes. My son's had complaints, his stomach hurts. I've heard other people aren't sending their kids, don't feel comfortable sending them. They don't think the school was cleaned properly, or people are just fully transferring their kids to a different school.
At what point would you feel comfortable moving back home?
When my house reads 0, because I feel like no trace of the chemical in my house with still air is safe. Things are being tested properly, or if outside companies would come in and double check anything that's being tested or continues.
How long do you think you'll be able to stay away from home? Because it can't be cheap.
Fortunately, I'm staying with my mother, so that has been a big burden off of me, and I know other people don't have the luxury. As long as it takes for their safety, if I need to drive them back and forth to school, what I was planning on doing, or if we need to relocate, I may have to do that.
Yeah. Well, and Kira, I mean, these are sentiments that I've heard echoed from other residents in this community, folks that say, look, yes, we see the readings on the gas monitors. We hear what's coming from the press conference saying that there's no contamination in the air and the water, but still, you see that hesitancy, that lack of assurance that, you know, in fact, the air and the water is safe. And I think there's also an understanding here that, you know, this is going to be something that has to continue to be monitored over a long period of time. It's not just going to be, you know, what the reading is today. It's going to be what it is a week from now, months from now, and ultimately years from now to get the entire impact of this.
All right, so Alex, if you don't mind, you guys all stay there. Mustafa, you worked for the EPA for more than 2 decades. Did you just hear the concerns there from Alex's guests about the environmental concerns, and anything you want to add that Alex could actually relay to her as we're having this conversation?
Well, you know, all the residents there should have real concerns. Anytime we're dealing with these toxic chemicals that are linked to cancer, folks should be paying attention and demanding that, as was said, that there will be ongoing evaluation and monitoring of the situation of both the air and the water. What we fail to sometimes have conversations with folks about is that we often talk about single chemicals instead of the cumulative and synergistic effects when chemicals begin to mix, and those impacts both on wildlife and on human life. So I understand the concerns that the residents there have. I've worked in over 1,000 communities across our country, and we've seen these chemical disasters before. There was a report that actually came out from a number of public health and environmental justice leaders in 2014 called Who's in Danger? Race, Poverty, and Chemical Disaster. And we know the communities that are often unseen and unheard. So I hope that the governor and others are listening to the voices of communities, understanding their concerns, and is willing to do what's necessary to put them not only the proper protections, but to also help people to be able to have the confidence to be able to come back home.
All right, so I have a couple questions then, Mustafa. As you just heard from Alex Guest, I mean, she says that she and her family are already experiencing respiratory issues. What did you think about that? Is it possible that this soon after a derailment like that with these specific toxic chemicals that can happen that quickly? That's my first question. And also, you know, the governor said that this wasn't considered a high hazardous train. So how the heck did that slip through the cracks?
Yeah, well, let's unpack that for folks. So the first question that you ask is, you know, I've always operated from the paradigm that communities speak for themselves. When communities share something with you, pay attention to it. Make sure that you have the health officials there actually helping to evaluate folks. So you've got to make sure that that is in place, because we know that the off-gassing that often happens in these types of situations can have significant impacts on people's health, on their lungs, on their eyes, on their skin, and sometimes even more critical types of conditions that play out from that. So folks should pay attention to what folks are sharing. They're sharing it for a reason. It is their sets of experiences. Let's find out what the problem is. You know, the second question that you asked, you know, it's almost nonsensical to say that this was not a train that was full of toxic material, that it was not a hazardous sort of situation train, because we know that we've got, you know, about 160,000 miles of track in our country. We've got 1,700 trails that have derailed, and we also know that 6 to 8% of those trains are carrying hazardous materials, toxic chemicals. And we've got to do a better job of helping people to understand what's literally moving through their backyards, in many instances through their communities, because we're creating these sacrifice zones with these vulnerable communities, and we know who the communities are. And the reason that they often get ignored is because they are lower wealth white communities, they're Black and brown and indigenous communities, and they're rural communities in many instances. So we have an opportunity now through this disaster, which is so unfortunate, to actually begin to change the dynamics. This is a moment where we can make sure that we have both on the legislative side and the resource side, things that folks who are living in these blast zones. There's studies also that have shared that we've got 25 million people across our country that live in these blast zones. And we have these chemical bombs that are moving through folks' communities, and we've got to make sure that they're protected.
So do you think this will actually lead to railroad reforms now?
I sure hope that that's a part of the equation. So one part of the equation is making sure that those who own the railroads and those who are regulating in that space are taking this so much more serious, and making sure that those safety protocols are enhanced, making sure that the inspections that are necessary are also being enhanced, because we know that we've seen that there are less trains that are moving, but they're longer trains, and we also know that more chemicals are actually being moved through that form of transportation. So I'm hoping folks on Capitol Hill and state houses and in other locations will take this as a moment and an opportunity to better protect people across our country.
Alex Prochet, Mustafa Ali, appreciate it so much. We'll continue the conversation as we learn more.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.